Hi, everybody. Hi, welcome. I liked the video countdown because it kind of it doesn't always work the same way. So that's funny on my side, just for you to know what happens on this side of the screen before we go live. So welcome back to the free bite-sized masterclass series for people who lead people and teams. And what we are going to discuss today is, hold on, managing change and crisis. So I also want to remind you what we talked about before. So last week, this week, and what we are going to talk about next week. So last week, we talked about the preparation stage of high performance because we said high performance is a cycle. So this is what we're talking about here, the full cycle: preparation, performance, and recovery. And last week it was all about preparation. So we talked a lot about emotional intelligence, mindset, body language, and how it influences mindset. And also we did some breathing and diction exercises. This week we talked about the actual performance. So we talked about managing your time, managing your team, and today it's going to be managing change. And then next week we go into the recovery stage, because that's an important, super important part in being able to perform at high levels long term. So we're going to talk about self-care strategies, the power of community, and the importance of higher purpose in engagement, motivation, and performance. All right. Before we move on, I just want to say, wherever you're watching this and whenever you're watching this, you're welcome to chip in, absolutely ask your questions, make your comments. I'm keeping my eye on the chat box, so I'm going to see your messages and your questions. So I will try to respond, even if I see them a few seconds late, because that's what happens. But hey, it still works. So today we're talking about how we can manage change in a crisis even better. So I wanted to talk about that a little before we dive right in, because managing change and managing crisis are not the same thing, and we'll see that in a few minutes. And also, leading change and managing change, that's not the same thing either, right? I mean, it might not come as a surprise, but hey, I wanted to make it clear from the beginning. So, leading change, that means that I either sponsor or initiate change. Look at this. I'm going to put it up so you can see, right? So that happens when we're leading change. When we're managing change, we're change agents and we execute change initiatives. So I think this is a pretty good distinction to make right off the bat. So we know what we're talking about when we talk about leading slash managing change. And now you can think about yourselves in your roles, if you are leading and when you are leading change, and if you're managing change and when you do that, or maybe you're doing both, and see when that happens and how it happens. Another thing that we need to address here at the beginning is change. There are four types of change. So it can be mission changes, strategic changes, operational changes, or technological changes. And now you can think about all sorts of the kind of changes that you experienced. But what happens when crisis comes on top of that is that crisis brings several types of change together at the same time. So if you think about this crisis that we're still experiencing, it's not over yet, and because the change that we're experiencing is continuous. I talked a lot today. So again, towards the end of the day, I do not have my words with me. Okay, so if you think about the crisis and the change that we have been going through, we've pretty much experienced all of these types of changes almost at the same time when the crisis hit, right? It might have been that the mission of your team, your business, your organization changed. There had to be some strategic changes in how you as a company, as an organization, dealt with issues and with challenges. Operational changes, absolutely. Some of the companies changed their structure because of the crisis. And I don't even have to mention technological changes because, hey, we all know what happened, right? So definitely they were there right from day one. I mean, think about it. We had to start working from home almost overnight, those of us who could, right? Because there are still some roles that cannot be fulfilled from a distance. But where that was possible, it was the change happened overnight. So that's one thing. And now let's talk a little bit about the differences and similarities between change and crisis. And we're also going to address the transition bit, and you're going to see why that's important. So with change, change looks at the end result, right? So whenever think about you and get some examples from your professional experience when you went through changes. How did that go? So we came to the conclusion, hey, we need to change something because we want this result, right? So it was a matter of realigning the culture, people, resources with a shift in the organizational direction. That was one thing. And then it was every change has a situational outcome, which means that that will result in new procedures, a new office, maybe new responsibilities, maybe a new boss, whatever it is. There's something new in the situation, but we're looking at something that happens in the future. So we're looking towards an end result. So that's why it's externally focused on the outcome, right? On the end result that the change produces, right? That's how we know that change happened. And then we also have transition. So if change is the end result, transition is the process that gets us there, right? So it's the process that helps us with the how we're gonna get there, how we're gonna make this change happen. And first of all, it deals with the emotional toll on people as they're adjusting from old ways to the new ones, right? And really, in this case, and think about changes that, again, have some story in the back of your mind of changes that you went through. And think about it, without transition, change doesn't really work because we don't get to the new. We don't get to that outcome, to that end result that we had in mind when change started. So the beginning of transition actually focuses on the end of what's being left behind so that we can move forward. And the beginning of transition, that means that that beginning deals a lot with that emotional toll because all change takes an emotional toll on the people who are involved in it. Whether we like it or not, whether we're aware of it or not, it doesn't really matter. It is an emotional toll because there's some old ways or identities that need to be left behind so that we can exist in the new reality. And if you think about it, this is what the crisis brought. And this is why a lot of us had so many issues with it. Because look at this, crisis management is the process by which the organization or the business, the team, deals with a disrupted and unexpected event that threatens to harm the organization, its stakeholders, its people, everybody. So it's not looking at the end result really from this perspective. The outcome doesn't look bright. So initially, the outcome really is negative, or at best, it's unclear, right? Because crisis just brings the outcome with it. It's the change took place already in the crisis, and then we need to deal with transition, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So crisis, when it comes, it accelerates change, so it accelerates that end result. And so if we want to find something positive as an outcome, we really need a lot of strategic thinking for for identifying long-term positive outcomes. Otherwise, initially they're negative because there's this disruptive element that threatens us. So it's basically life or death situation, right? That's what happens when crisis hits. Okay, so what we were saying here is, okay, we have change and we have transition, right? So for change to happen, we need transition to happen properly. And the whole process has these three main stages: the beginning, the middle, and the end, or the arrival. And that is the point of change. That's when changes happen. Now, what happens when we're managing change is that we're not really managing change as such. We're actually managing transitions from the old ways of doing things to onto the new ways of doing things. So if you look at it, change is the actual arrival. Transitions are how we get there. And crisis accelerates arrival before it even completes, before it even starts with transitions. And I'm going to stop here for a minute because I think this is important and we need to think about, again, the example of the crisis. When the crisis hit, what that meant is, again, we take the example of people working from home. Well, let me tell you, again, people started to work from home. Majority of people started to work from home almost overnight. So change already happened, right? We were working from home in whatever way, whatever shape or form, right? The change was already there. And then after that change happened because of the crisis accelerated change to happen, right? Or we arrived in the point of change. And then we started to figure out the process and everything that we needed to have in place for work from home to actually work on a long term, because crisis didn't seem to end. And that was another element in this particular crisis, because usually the crisis comes and goes. It's and it brings speed with it. So the main difference between change and crisis is speed. And the point that we're looking at it from. So with change, we're looking forward. With crisis, we're looking at what happened and we're trying to deal with it, to catch up so that we can manage that change that already happened. So that's it. Usually crisis brings this element of speed. But what happened with this particular crisis is that it hit us very abruptly and then it didn't go away. It lasted for a longer period of time. So we had to basically catch up with it along the way, over and over and over again, because it was a continuous cycle of change. We were moving from one change to the next, and we are still moving from one change to the next with everything as we build our steps along the way. So we need to keep that in mind whenever we talk about the whole process of change transition, and understand that change does not happen without transition, and in a crisis, transition happens after the change has happened. That's why it's so difficult, and it enhances the emotional toll that it takes on us. So when we talk about crisis management and change management, we're basically talking about, when we talk about change, we talk about management before the event. So we have the outcome, and we're looking, yes, we are still looking at an uncertain future because we know what outcome we'd like to have, but we still don't know 100%. We don't have the guarantee 100% that it's going to come out that way. So it might still be uncertain, and people might still not be sure what to do and looking for guidance. But in a normal pace of change, we do have time to plan, we do have time to strategize, implement, readjust, evaluate. And we do have time to train people to adapt to help them adapt to situations and be resilient about the change. So we have time to deal with the emotional charge that change means for us. And then we look constantly for reassurance that, hey, where we're going is going to be better than where we've been. That's um, the hope part of the change. And yes, a lot of communication. We need a lot of communication with change. We need even more communication with crisis. So if with change, communication is needed, in crisis, communication is crucial. It's a life and death thing. With crisis, we're basically managing change after the event. So we're managing change after it's taken place. And because of the speed that crisis brings, decisions must be made within such a short time frame. And what happened with this crisis, again, we had to keep making decisions in regular short time frames, from one day to the next, 1 week to the next, 1 month to the next. And there really is no reassurance about the outcome. This is why I'm saying, when we're looking at a crisis, we really need a lot of strategic planning so that we can think long term about a possible positive outcome for our organization business team, if we are able to follow the steps in the strategic plan. And you will already have identified these 6 stages of uh, this particular crisis as well. So we have the warning signs, right? Okay, there might be this virus, that might be a problem. And then we're starting to make risk assessments. Okay, what did that mean for us? How much will that impact us? Will it impact us at all? And there have been organizations who said, okay, we need to prepare for this if and when it impacts us. Others who just froze and said, okay, let's sit and wait and see what happens. So the responses here, again, in a crisis, are similar to the life and death response, right? So it's either fighting or freezing or fleeing. And then how do we manage the whole change, then the whole situation and the transition, and come to a resolution? Come to, okay, what has happened so far, what do we keep, what do we ditch, what do we keep changing, and how can we think about recovering? And this is where we need to come in all of this process. We need to come up with creative and innovative solutions all along the way, because of the continuous change, because of the speed with which things change around us. Okay, so we talked about change, we talked about crisis, and it's also important to talk about how people react to change. Because, if we didn't talk about people here, we cannot really talk about change, because what would we be talking about really, right? It's how people react to it that can make the change a good experience or a not so good experience or even a bad experience, right? So think about it this way. We have different ways in which we react, adapt, different ways in which we think about change. And I'm sharing this diffusion of innovation model from Everett Rogers. He's the one who discovered these 5 ways in which people react to change. And typically in any organization, in any team or business, it really doesn't matter how big or small they are, you will have 2.5% innovators. And the innovators are typical game changers. Now, for those of you who weren't here yesterday when we talked about managing teams, all you need to do to have an even better understanding of this and how your people, how your team can have an impact in your organization, especially in times of change and crisis, go to yesterday's session. So all you need to do is click on the link in the description of the video, and you'll be getting all of your replays for all of the master classes that we've had so far, including the one yesterday. And we talked about game changers. Now, these were people who like and embrace new things and initiatives. So they are the ones who are either the first in line or first seeking out further information and new ways of doing things. Then the next 13.5% are the early adopters, who are people who are more compliant with managers' requests, either because they feel obligated to do it or because they're also playmakers in an organization or in a team. So that means that they're looking to harmonize relationships. They like people working well with one another. So that is their motivation for adopting change early. Again, we talked about playmakers in the session yesterday. Get your resources on the link in the description so you know what we're talking about, and it will make such a better sense for you as a team leader, as a team manager if you put everything together. And then you have early majority. And these are the people, the next 34%, who would like to, sit and wait and see what approach you're making and also what value that new approach is bringing. So they want to see value. They're the quality people. And then you have 2 more, the late majority or the skeptics. And these are people who trust data, they're more analytical, they're not really convinced by anything too hype or popular. It doesn't matter to them. To them, they believe in the tried and tested, and they need to see that, hey, you know what, this is the way to go from now on because it's been tried, it's been tested, and it's working. So they need to rely on good data. They need to see the data before they can become strong advocates. But when they do, they really are advocates and they are valuable allies for you. So, and what also happens with them is that they typically would have a following of people that admire them for their analytical skills and who value their research and conclusions. So if you win the skeptics over, then that often means that you also win over their followers. And the last category, but in no way the least, are the laggards or cave people. Now, cave stands for Citizens Against Virtually Everything. And okay, if you've met people like that, just know that the reason that they don't join or don't care too much about outcomes is that they've often had a bad experience with previous programs implemented. And these programs to them, they didn't bring any value, or they only did more harm than good. So definitely you need to make them part of the change considerations. And if you can, buddy them with the skeptics, because the skeptics will have the raw data, the reliable data that the laggards can also look at so that they can eventually adapt to change and move with change. So, stopping here for a while just to share this exercise with you because I think it's a good exercise for you to make. Either, if you're a team leader, a team manager, or even a business owner, a business leader, think about people on your team who are part of one of these categories. See if you can identify them, right? Because I think that's how you will know who you can talk to in different stages if you are moving and whenever you're moving to implement change. So think about who are your innovators, your early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggers, and also think about opinion leaders in the early adopters group because they will be also helping you with promoting change. You will also need ambassadors whenever you want to make change happen. And also think about you. Where are you in in this? Are you an innovator? Are you an early adopter? Maybe you would prefer to be a late majority, but if you're a leader, can you really be a late majority? What are the cons? What are the pros? And everything. If you just think about it, you will notice what your tendency is when it comes to reacting to change. So let's have a look at what we can do to thrive through change and also crisis, because so far we've pretty much been surviving, but what can we really do to thrive through change? And also prepare the ground so that we have a solid basis to stand on whenever some external crisis hits us. So the first thing, and I think this comes as no surprise really, expect ambiguity because really nobody has all of the answers right now. And everybody is looking, so there is no general recipe, there is no one size fits all. So in any crisis, in everything that we're doing, moving from one step to the next, the first thing is to align expectations. So if we align our expectation here that we can expect ambiguity, that's already a win. The second thing, build emotional strength. And we've seen that with this particular crisis because, again, in a crisis, the emotional toll that you would have in a typical change is even higher. So, how are your people dealing or ready to deal? How are you helping them deal with continuous change as a way of life? And not just continuous change, but change that is as abrupt and as fast as this one needed to be. So, and think about yourself again as a team leader, as a team manager, you don't exclude yourself from the team. The way that you think about yourself, you think about your people and the other way around. So, what about your emotional strength? Create opportunities because remember, change, yes, it offers uncertainty and challenges, but it also offers opportunity. So, what we can do with change after the crisis passed, or a, a little bit right after the crisis, we can start thinking about creating opportunity for growth, for productivity, and for personal transformation. Because again, the way that we transform individually and as a team is going to help transform the organization. Otherwise, we stay stuck in the old ways of doing things that no longer serve us for the results that we need to produce. Empower. And that comes with what we talked about yesterday in team management. So again, go and click on the link to get the resources from yesterday's session as well. But we talked about flexibility and productive collaboration, and that brings creativity, decision making, and problem solving. They exist because your team, because people are, they feel free and they feel confident and they feel safe to engage their talents, to contribute at their best, to be creative, to ask the questions, to challenge the situations. They're not, if they are stuck wondering whether or not they should be asking the question, whether or not they should be sending that email, whether or not they can challenge that situation, that's not a healthy, productive, creative environment for people to thrive through change. So something needs to shift there in the culture. Involve people in the process. That goes with the previous point, right? So you can run surveys, polls, focus groups. Now, it really depends. I've worked with a lot of teams. In larger teams, yes, you can run surveys, polls, and focus groups. If you're a small organization, if you're a small team, then you don't need that. The more you communicate, the better. The more you just ask for opinions from people, the more you will get feedback from them, and you can move from one change to the next. And you can also create transition management teams. Again, if you're a small team, you're it, right? You are the transition management team. So if you're a larger team, then if you're working in a larger organization, you have a bigger team, you can create transition management teams. The whole point of this is you don't have to do it alone, and you shouldn't. I don't like to shoot people, and you shouldn't shoot yourself. But this is a should. You shouldn't do that alone, because this is a time where, again, nobody really has the full recipe of how we're going to go through this and what's going to happen next. And then it's all about team leadership. Whenever we talk about team leadership, we also talk about the power of the team and who can take the helm depending on the situation of the reality around us, on their expertise, because we're hiring people for what they can do, for what they bring, for what they're good at. And that's what makes them feel motivated and engaged. We talked about that yesterday a lot. I could talk about it all day because this is what I love helping teams with. But here it is. And not that you don't have to do it alone. If you don't do it alone, it's even better for everybody, because you get to come out as a stronger team at the end of this. You can also select a team leader. So you can put someone in charge that has the respect of the other members of the team. And in any case, as a leader, as a manager, you need to know how to delegate and what you can delegate, so that things get done, and so that you don't become a bottleneck in the whole operation, and make things go smoothly. Another super important bit. In change, we can plan for this. With a crisis, we can plan for this after the crisis happened. But whatever you do, make sure that you have training combined with group coaching. This is what I've done with the teams I'm working with, and this is what I always recommend, because training sessions are good for opening eyes and for helping people understand what are some ways in which things need to be done. So we find out about stuff that's available and possible. But if we don't then sit down and really bring this down to discussion and practical approach, so that we can apply the learning in real life, in the real workplace environment, 80% of what we learned in a training session is lost. This is why you don't see return on investment, return on expectations whenever we're sending people off to 1-day training courses or 1-week training courses. Really doesn't matter, because then they come back in their old environment and they cannot apply the learning in that environment because the environment hasn't changed. So what group coaching, in, especially in a crisis, especially in change, brings is a regular environment where people feel safe, where people feel supportive, where people can discuss challenges, opportunities, and look at what they can do. And they come up with ideas of how we're implementing, because it's one thing to get the idea and the strategy, and another to really get down to how we're going to implement this from one day to the next. Who's going to be doing what and by when? So, what are your initiatives in place for continuous learning? What also helps is to bring experts from outside, because what that helps with is that they offer objectivity and they can give you a fresh perspective, because it's really in the midst of it all, and especially in a crisis, you're so much in the middle of things and overwhelmed by everything that's going on, that really somebody coming in from outside and offering the fresh perspective might be a lifesaver. And communicate progress. Like, we talk about communication a lot. Absolutely use all of your systems in place: emails, newsletters, group chats, forums, whatever you have. Again, we talked about that yesterday. Again, go and watch that one too, because you have formal and informal ways of communication for your team to know that they're not isolated, they're not alone, that they still are part of the group, of the team. And whatever you do, celebrate incremental changes, because by moving all the way from A to Z, it's not going to help us so much as moving from A to B, from B to the C, and then measuring the changes and seeing what worked, what didn't work, what can we still tweak, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And that brings me to the last point, which is evaluate and reward work. And I have to say, feedback is going to be absolutely crucial, especially in a crisis. And whatever you do, this is where celebrating incremental changes helps, because you get to monitor them as well. And in all of your communications with your team, recognize the achievements and also the sacrifices that people have made to make it come together. Because if we only talk about successes and we don't recognize the challenges and the sacrifices, people are not going to feel heard, people are not going to feel understood, and they're not going to feel valued. And you go back to your team not feeling motivated, engaged, and people not feeling included. And we go back to, again, what we discussed yesterday. We can only motivate and engage others externally that much, but the rest has to come from the inside. It has to be intrinsic motivation. So recognizing both achievements and sacrifices that people made, that is crucial, because that means that there's a lot of transparency in place as well. Okay. So I could keep talking about this, but I'm already over time. It was supposed to last 30 minutes and it's almost 40. So if you want the resources, click on the link in the description of this video. You will get the session handout. I also included a meeting link for you to book. I'm happy to talk to you about challenges or needs for strategies in your team, in your organization, in your business to help you move through change and crisis. So if you want to talk to me about it, either book a meeting with that link or just message me and we'll take it from there. It's really no problem. And I also included some more useful links for you. What I want to also tell you is that we do a lot of all of the stuff that we discussed here in all of the sessions so far. Sorry, that is my messenger. I try to put my phone on mute, but somehow Messenger still wants to talk to me. Okay, so this is why I created the Lead for Legacy League, and this is the global online group program for management and leadership development. And a lot of change management, crisis management, team management, we discuss all of that. And not only that, but you have the online courses in this program that relates to leadership, sales, and customer service. Over 250 online courses where you get the technical management and leadership knowledge. And what we also do is we talk about the practical approach of how you can apply about your case studies, about your needs, your challenges in the group. And that's a group of global peers, and we discuss, we brainstorm, and we network together, and we talk about specific application of what we learn here, the theory. How can we apply it in practice so that we can move forward, so that you grow as a leader, so that you grow your team, your organization, or your business. So if you want to learn more about the league, let me know. I'm happy to chat to you about it because I still have Black Friday prices for joining the league, and it's super flexible. I want it to be global, affordable, flexible, and absolutely valuable to you. So let me know if you're interested to find out more. All right, that was it for today. And next time, we are talking about self care strategies for high performance. Again, next week, we are starting the recovery phase. We talk about the recovery phase in the high performance cycle. And that is important if we're looking at high performance from a long term perspective. How we recover is crucial, has a crucial impact on how we perform. Again, think about yourself as a team leader, manager, business leader. Think about yourself as a high performing athlete. High performing athletes, they know how to prepare, technical skills, mental, emotional, physical, everything. So when we talk about preparation, we talk about all of these. They know what to do in a high performance setting. They know also how to pick themselves up when they have a bad day and when they need to perform at high levels again tomorrow, because they know how to recover after failure. And I don't like to talk about failure in this context because I think it's a lot of trial and error involved. Whereas failure to me is where you tried and then you gave up and you didn't try again. Learning is trial and error. That's the whole process, and that's essential for high performance. Okay. Thank you so much again for joining me. And remember, next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, from either 12:30 or 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, have a great rest of your week and bye for now.